election night special program brought to you by Midpen Media Center, Palo Alto Online, and the Almanac. In this hour, we'll be covering the latest results from local races, from the Mountain View City Council to the Atherton City Council. We're broadcasting tonight on local cable channel 30, midpenmedia.org, youtube.com/PA Weekly, and KZSU 90.1 FM. I'm Jocelyn Dong, editor of the Palo Alto Weekly. Our very busy reporters have lined up interviews with several candidates so you can hear their reactions to the early election results. And for commentary, I'm joined by two longtime community leaders, Henrietta Burrows, the executive director of the East Palo Alto Media Center and host of Talking with Henrietta, and Vic Ojakian, a two-term Palo Alto City Council member and former mayor. So Vic and Henrietta, good to be here with you.
Happy to be with you.
So we're going to dive right into the vote tallies from the Registrar of Voters. And I think we're going to first queue up the Palo Alto City Council race. Here we are. These are results that came in at 8 o'clock and was updated at 9 o'clock. Here we see Pat Burt, Lydia Greer-Stone, and Greg Tanaka in the top 4 spots. There are 4 seats open. Vic, can you give us a little bit of background in context for this race?
What we know is that we have 2 incumbents running, 4 seats open, and we have, as everybody can see, 10 challengers. These results are partial results, as it says at the bottom. It's 52%. We should expect a lot more. But I'll tell you from talking to people in town, these results are pretty close to what people have said to me that they would be.
So these are not unexpected for you. What about Ed Lowing? He's hovering there in 5th place.
Yeah, and I think he still has a chance because, again, we have half the results in and we're not sure exactly where these results are from. But it's interesting because for some people, like in some of the jurisdictions we're going to talk about tonight, we have those people that are considered progressives or in sort of a camp that wants more change versus those people who are more established, and including some people have talked about the fact that they wanted experience and continuity because of what's going on with COVID, the economy, and some of the inequities that are happening in our society. So for now, it looks like those candidates that are more in the experience category are taking the lead.
Yeah, that's great. We'll dive more into the city council race in just a minute. We're going to roll through a couple more races. Right now, we're going to move to the Palo Alto Board of Education. You can cue those up. So this was a race with 6 candidates, and we have 3 seats that are open. Looks like incumbent Jennifer DiBrienza is farthest out ahead. And then we have challenger Jesse Latimerak and other incumbent Todd Collins. Vic, what was going on in this race this year?
So again, we know in this race, besides the 3 seats being open, we have 2 incumbents. And again, and I heard this early on after the filing, that people were looking for experience and stability because of what the disruption caused by COVID. Jennifer is not a surprise. If you remember 4 years ago, she finished clearly ahead of everybody in 1st place. Todd Collins is maybe a little bit more of a surprise in terms of the numbers we're seeing right now because he finished a clear 2nd 4 years ago. And then Jesse Latimerak, who's in my opinion, an up-and-coming star, is doing well. And I don't think that's surprising, to be honest with you. I think a combination of her background with a variety of experiences, the fact that she was born and raised in Palo Alto, went through the school system here, and now has got 4 children in the school system. She's very popular with a lot of people. And the one other comment I'd make about her because I made it to her today, is she had a very good campaign staff. They ran a good campaign in a very unusual environment.
Very, very unusual. Yeah, takes a lot of organization to get out during a pandemic when you can't see people face to face. Let's go into the Menlo Park City Council results right now. We've got, and this is paired with Atherton City Council, so you get a 2-for-1 here. Jen Willows is way out there over the other two. So she's an incumbent. She's actually not an incumbent. She's a challenger. There's 1 seat open for Menlo Park City Council. Context for that, Vic?
I think the interesting thing is, you know, since a law passed a couple of years ago, Menlo Park now has district elections. What we saw before in the 2 Palo Alto races, and we'll see with Atherton and others, is you have at-large elections where everybody in the jurisdiction can vote for any of the candidates. But here we have a district election. And my quick take on this is, again, I'm not too surprised at the order of the voting, because Jen seemed to run a good campaign. As I was kidding somebody walking through District 3, which I do most days, you could see a cascade of, over a period of time, of her getting more signs up and things like that. And she's the only candidate that actually raised money for this election. Though I think her challengers are both have good qualifications. So, but it looks like sort of a ground game helped out here more than anything. And with Atherton, sure. I think the surprise with Atherton is it's 2 seats, 2 incumbents running, and at least thus far with the results that we have, Ms. Lewis was expected to do very well as an incumbent, and just her background, and she is doing well. A little more of a surprise is Hawkins, let's see if I can pronounce her name correctly, Manula. But anyway, yeah, I noticed that she got good endorsements. That's the, you know, not being an incumbent, you have to have a lot of things going for you. And she looks like she had good support from people. We'll probably talk about this election maybe a little bit later. You know, there's a main issue in that city that I think has affected the vote, frankly.
For sure. Okay, we'll get to that. And let's go on to East Palo Alto City Council. We have 3 seats. We have 3 incumbents, but one of the incumbents is pretty far down the list there, Larry Moody. Henrietta, can you tell us a little bit about who's running, what this field is like?
Well, we had 7 candidates running for 3 seats, and the city council is a 5-member council. And it's interesting that 2 incumbents so far are at the top, at the top 3, with a newcomer, Webster Lincoln, who is an engineer, a tech in the tech industry, who is coming in second, which is something of a surprise. There were 4 challengers altogether, 3 of them representing the youth, and they were all very, very impressive. Some of them even taught by those who are the incumbents. So it's going to be interesting to see how this will actually settle out. They were all for affordable housing, all of them. They were all for the most part, keeping rents low, also for managing development, bringing jobs and businesses to the city and supporting local businesses, and creating a pathway for the youth in the community.
Okay, all right. Let's go over to the Ravenswood City School District real quick. Here we have 1 incumbent, but there's only 2 seats, and she seems to be getting edged out of that. Is that a surprise?
I guess yes and no, but you know, in both of those races, the city council and the school district, the challengers were really very impressive with their messages. And Browen is a teacher in the district. She's taught in the district for 15 years. And Jenny Bloom also has teaching credentials, a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in education, and she's currently teaching. And they had very impressive campaigns. So in a way, it's a surprise, but it looks right now, unless there's some drastic changes, that they might get the 2 seats.
Okay, sounds like they did a great job with our campaigns. You know, this whole election has been such an unusual one for so many reasons. You know, on the national level, we've got a polarizing president who, don't want to call it yet, but, you know, looks like he may be reelected. We've had a pandemic that's forced voting by mail. There's been a huge learning curve. So Vic and Henrietta, what do you make out of this election season? I mean, have we seen historic turnouts? You know, what are we seeing as far as kind of the response of voters to this very challenging time? Maybe Vic, what do we know about the turnout based on the numbers so far?
Well, I have been hearing that there's been a remarkable turnout even before today, which has broken all records. And so we might be seeing something new. And when I say turnout, what I'm thinking is, yeah, across the country, the long lines, and then there's been record-breaking mail-in ballots. And so it's we'll be finding out a few days from now the difference that those ballots, mailed in ballots or dropped off ballots, will be making in terms of the election results. So I think we're seeing some new trends developing. What do you think, Vic?
Well, from what I saw, the voter registration data that we looked at some of us earlier this week, the numbers are high. I think we expect better voter turnout maybe than in the past. And off of the comment that you made, Jocelyn, knowing Palo Alto, we, regardless of what's happening nationally and our feelings about that, this is a Palo Alto, and I imagine East Palo Alto and the other jurisdictions, they're engaged communities. We have our own issues, our own interests, and regardless of what's happening somewhere else, you're always going to have people following what's happening, and you're going to have competitive elections.
And I think what's remarkable about this particular election, in terms of the people I've talked to and what I've heard in terms of radio shows and television shows, is that people are very stressed out. Vic mentioned engaged, but it's something that they're taking very, very personally, that's affecting them emotionally. And I don't know if we've seen this in any other previous elections to the degree that we're seeing it now.
There certainly were a lot of people who were anxious to get their votes in. They were running to the ballots. Vic, I think you actually turned in your ballot pretty early. You said, you know, get the ballot on the 5th.
I have my own procedure I follow. I make sure that I set a day aside and I study all the issues. And then I always do that just before I know I'm going to get my absentee mail-in ballot sent out this year, October 5th. And then I'm ready to go. I just fill it out and then I go turn it in. I always put it in the drop box so that I don't have to depend on the mail. And after some of the comments being made this year, I made sure I didn't use the mail. So yes, I was probably in the first 2%. That for those people who don't know, the county tracks all that, shows it on a graph, and you can sort of get a feel for who's turning in what when. So I know I turned mine in the first probably 2% of the voters.
Well, some people have to vote on.
Oh, go ahead, Henrietta.
I was going to say some people have to vote on election day, and I'm one of those people. You know, as a journalist, there's nothing like a deadline. And there is that saying, thank goodness for the last minute, or a lot of things wouldn't be done. So I voted much
Mhm.
earlier in the day, dropped my ballot off in one of the drop-in centers
Mhm.
earlier in the
Mhm.
day to make sure that it was actually there, and then went to ballot track to begin to track it. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly it will be registered.
We should note too, in Santa Clara County, separate from people hearing comments about deadlines in other parts of the country or elsewhere, in Santa Clara County, they'll count votes up to 17 days
Yeah,
from election day.
yes.
So we have a time ahead of us. But a lot of people have turned in their ballots, and we know they've counted them.
So what you're saying is that the vote, the results will not be official until about what, November 12th?
So I think we're ready to move on to the next thing.
Yes, if Jocelyn is with us and I see her talking. So I guess what then we need to do is to read out some more election returns.
Well, either that or Gennady
Oh, yes.
has a candidate that's going to speak.
Oh, hi, everyone. Well, first of all, we will have a candidate shortly. He's not here at this moment yet, but he is in the waiting room, and we could get him in. And we will be speaking to the #1 vote getter from the results that are released so far, which is former mayor and council member Pat Byrd. And I see he's right here, he just joined us. First of all, I just want to make a few quick comments about the results. I feel like a former mayor, Jackie, kind of mentioned about the political dynamics in Palo Alto and what this election means. And from my reading of it, if results stand as they are right now, there would be a pretty significant power shift between the two kind of camps in Palo Alto, the more pro-growth and the more slow-growth residentialists. And the power would pretty much go from the former to the latter. And Pat Byrd, who has traditionally been more of a centrist, a swing vote on the council, he looks like he's poised to join it with more votes than anyone else. So with Pat being here, I'm just hoping to talk to him for a few minutes. And I wanted to ask you, Pat, obviously huge difference in campaigning this time around versus your last two campaigns. How did you approach this election season, given all the circumstances?
Well, we actually had a lot more of actual group engagements through so many Zoom, not only more debates, but more coffees or virtual coffees. And in some ways, in terms of having the whole candidate pool have opportunities to discuss and debate, I think there are more opportunities. There were less opportunities to have one-on-one kind of retail campaigning, which is in a lot of ways the more fulfilling way to be able to hear from the community and for them to really get to know the candidates. So a little bit plus and minus.
Do you think this gave an advantage to incumbents like yourself? The fact that a lot of people in the city probably know you better than they know some of the newer candidates?
I don't know. It was a really vigorous campaign. I'm not sure that it would have been more in a more engaged electorate if we had had the traditional campaigning. There was a lot of campaigning and a lot more that went online, but there was a tremendous amount of communication that went on. So I'm not sure that's the case. Yeah, I think more perhaps the emergencies that we're in, of the health emergency, the city fiscal emergency, and the community business emergency, maybe made the electorate really want to make sure that we had strong governance.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you've spent 9 years on the council. Your last term ended 2016. And as I described you in the intro, you were kind of seen as a bit of a swing vote, a bit of a centrist, slightly aligned with maybe Karen Holman and the more slow growth people, but not exactly in either camp. Do you expect your role to be similar in the new council if these results stand and you are elected along with the 3 other candidates who are currently in the lead.
I suspect so, and I never thought of myself as kind of a swing vote as so much as leading from the center and attempting to be a consensus builder and problem solver on specific issues. And so I think those are roles that I value playing that role, and I think that there's a need for it in the community, and hope to be able to offer some of that again.
Okay. Well, I'm just gonna ask one more question because I know we have a lot to fit into the show, but now that it looks like you will be on the council, what are going to be your top priorities as a council member? And I know you talked about it some of the campaign, but
yeah,
more certainly.
and I think those really are the top priorities. It's a combination of really refocusing our resources over the next year and a half or so of what will probably be the remainder of an emergency, and how do we continue to provide the essential services that community needs? How do we respond to additional needs? Second, to really continue on a path of having more sustainable development, which means not only moderating the rate of growth, but mostly moderating the rate of office growth and increasing the rate of housing growth in all the income levels and for the types of housing, from families to single younger adults and seniors, and to have that as a balance in transportation and housing, so that we have some semblance of social and economic balance that we try to retain in Palo Alto and our region. And then lastly, we really have had a great focus in recent months on social justice reforms. And I think that's one area that the council is doing a good job on. After, I was very disappointed when they actually reduced the role of the independent police auditor in December, and they seem to have really seen the light. And we have a combination of community leaders and city staff, leadership in the police department, as well as throughout the city staff and on the council, and they all seem to have really embraced wanting to move us toward a new standard in both our policing practices, and then beyond that, other elements of social justice.
Well, Pat, I do feel like housing and police oversight are 2 things that pretty much all candidates have had in common, and I certainly look forward to seeing how the new council tackles these issues. And I believe right now I'm gonna pass the baton back to Jocelyn so we can talk about the school board race. But thank you so much for joining us.
You bet. Bye-bye.
So maybe we'll jump in and say a few words about the Palo Alto school board race. Well, Jocelyn adjusts her sound. So as we mentioned before, there are 3 seats open, and there are 2 incumbents running. And I know from the word on the street that I had been getting is that a number of people were interested in re-electing incumbents, especially given the unstable environment that we're currently in. My own opinion, well, maybe not my own, this was a very looked at race, because this was a group of candidates that, depending on who you were or are, you felt that this was a nice or experienced and at least well-qualified group of people. So everybody had expected it to be somewhat of a competitive race. We mentioned something about the people who were in the first 3 positions. I should say that Katie Causey, though some people talked about her age and maybe some of her lack of experience, ran a very good campaign. There were a number of people in town I know that were very high on her, and worked for her and wanted to see her get elected. And similarly, the other candidates, Karna maybe picked the wrong election to be in some ways. In another election cycle, she might have been the candidate that did very well. But again, this is an election where there are a number of qualified people that ran good campaigns and had a cross section of the community supporting them. And I don't know,
Hey,
I think,
Vic, can you hear me?
yep,
Can you hear me? Oh,
Yes.
I'm back. Yay.
Yep.
I just want to welcome Elena Kadvani, reporter of Elena Kadvani, to our group. And then she is going to interview Jesse Ladmarek. So can we get Elena and Jesse on board here?
I'm here. Is Jessie here?
I'm
I think
here.
there she is. Well, thanks for joining us. Vic kind of covered all the bases. I think I was really interested to see if reopening schools and the district's response to the pandemic would sway the results in any way. And I think in some ways it did, in some ways it didn't. You ran as really wanting to bring the parent voice and that direct experience with what's going on in the schools right now to the school board. And the two top vote getters right now are both parents. And I'm curious what you think that says about this race and sort of the state of the district right now.
Yeah, you know, someone said to me the other day that all of a sudden people in Palo Alto realized that the school board matters. You know, it was for a while, you kind of didn't know who was on the school board, didn't really think it was sort of an afterthought. And then with COVID and schools closing, and all of a sudden the decisions we were making were really relevant to people's lives. And I think having the parent voice, particularly for this cycle, I felt like from the feedback I was getting that was really important to a lot of people. And even people who didn't necessarily have kids in the district. People who are retired, kids had gone through the district, but just felt like needing parents on the board, particularly right now. So yeah, I do think it was relevant for sure.
What was this campaign like for you? I know you don't have anything to compare it to, but you know, running things through Zoom and not being able to meet people and go door to door, especially as someone who you've said yourself you were not so widely known in school circles before this.
Exactly. You know, but I think, I don't know, there was something, I think one of the benefits of Zoom, I will say, is that we were able to do a lot more events. So I did feel like I talked to a ton of people, and I also this is sort of a big part of my campaign, what's important to me if I'm on the board, and something that I try to do during my campaign, was really reach out to a lot of people, and people who don't necessarily feel like they have a voice in the district already. So I made a point of talking on the phone with anyone who emailed me, anyone who reached out to my campaign. I would set a time to talk. And, you know, I'm kind of an introvert. So for me, having those one-on-one, more intimate conversations those are far more comfortable for me anyways. And I feel like it's hard in forums. Sometimes you have a minute to talk about an issue that's really complicated and nuanced and subtle. And I wanted to make sure that I was able to really answer people's questions in a thoughtful way. So I did a lot of that, a lot of Zoom events, a lot of emailing and speaking with people individually on the phone. We got a bunch of middle schoolers and high schoolers on their bikes doing lit drops and stuff like that. So, you know, we tried to reach a lot of houses, and I think we did, but it was just an untraditional way.
Yeah. What do you see as the defining issue of this campaign?
I mean, I think right now all anybody's thinking about with schools is COVID and educating our kids and keeping them mentally well and safe and healthy, keeping them engaged in school, not losing them into just sort of isolation and checking out. So I think that's really the primary focus of everyone right now, is getting us through this.
Yeah, and whoever is elected to the board will, I mean, there are so many decision points ahead the rest of the school year, and I'm sure a lot more change to come for students and teachers and parents.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, thank you for your time. I think we'll pass the baton back to our hosts.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, I think I think the next thing we were going to talk about, Jocelyn's working on her sound. So Henrietta, feel free to jump in with me.
Yes, I'm working on my sound
You're
too.
working on your sound too. So
I finally got it back, so that's terrific. So
okay.
we've just heard Jesse, and do we have more election returns that we can turn to now?
Because I think one of the races that we want to talk about, we talked about this leading up to the meeting because of how unusual the Santa Clara County Board of Education race has become. What was always sort of a quiet, sleepy race where some people maybe didn't even know who the candidates were that were running. And now each of the areas, there's 3 areas up for re-election this year, including the one that represents this part of the county. And these races have become high-profile races. And I don't know, Jocelyn, are you back with us?
So right now, I'm just wondering, when you talk about the races, which ones in particular do you think have the most surprises going for them?
You mean of all the races that we have that we've seen?
Why don't we take a look
I-
at that and see where the surprises are coming
Yeah.
in?
I think the interesting thing is of all the races, what we're seeing, including some that we haven't, or at least one we haven't talked about, is generally speaking, the incumbents are doing well.
Yes, they are.
In a few cases, as we saw in East Palo Alto, we're seeing in both East Palo Alto races, city council and school board, we have a couple of incumbents being bumped, but 2 of the 3 still in the mix.
Which is
The
really a surprise when you consider the ethnic makeup of East Palo Alto and the ethnic makeup of the council, and what looks like it will be the continuing ethnic makeup of the council.
Yeah, I think that's right. Some of the other races, again, we're seeing where not necessarily the high profile endorsements necessarily endorsed people. We're seeing those incumbents still do well. Just quickly on the Santa Clara County Board of Education race, I think a lot of our viewers probably have followed it, but we had 2 candidates, clearly an issues campaign because of the whole issue around charter versus non-charter schools. And let's see if Bill's got the results up there. Yep, there they are. In a race that where if we get a chance, we might talk about campaign financing a little bit tonight, but in a race where both of the candidates have raised inordinate amounts of money, way beyond what we normally see. One candidate at last reporting was almost at $400,000, and the other candidate was at over $200,000. And I don't know how many of our viewers have ever been to a Santa Clara County Board of Education meeting.
Yes.
I have, because of some of the work that I do. And normally they're sparsely attended and they're quiet sorts of meetings. But we have a high profile campaign because of the whole issue around charter schools, a lot of money being spent. And what we've seen from the results that were just quickly put up there, a horse race where there's just a little gap between them.
Sure. Well, Grace Ma, it said it was interesting that she was in the lead, but then it said she was trailing, and her opponent certainly had far more endorsements and far more individuals behind her. So I'm just wondering exactly what it matters in terms of the amount of money spent, but maybe we can get back to that because we have a video that's coming up right now. So if they're ready for the video. Oh, well, let's go on. You have done some research when it comes to fundraising and the amount of money being spent on campaigns. Do you think the amount of money being spent in the Palo Alto City Council race, for example, is on par with what it's been in the past?
I'm chuckling, Henrietta, as I'm sure some of the people who are watching this know. Let's separate sort of the races from 20 years ago, going back in time, and what's happened since basically, I think, 2014, where a council member helped finance his campaign and put in tens of thousands of dollars to do that. So what we've seen is, if you go back to my day, people were raising $15,000, $20,000 to spend on a campaign. If we're talking about Palo Alto. And if somebody raised more than that, which one candidate did, they were basically denigrated for that. And the particular candidate I'm thinking about from in the past lost.
Yeah,
People,
the race of 2016.
yeah, people didn't like the fact that you went out and raised money, especially if it was outside of the community. Now, fast forward to 2014, and maybe Citizens United, we're seeing a whole mix of things come into play. And we're seeing some people raise up to $100,000 for a local election on the city, Palo Alto City Council side. If you look at some of the other races, the school board race, like this year's, they're in the 20, 25, and maybe reaching up to $30,000. But on the Palo Alto City Council side, almost every candidate raised $40,000 in the last reporting, 40,000 plus, and a couple of candidates more than that. So what we've seen quickly over the last few years is that there have been a number of candidates who have raised, again, more than $50,000. And generally speaking, if you look at what happened, they lost.
So Vic, tell me, where is all of that money coming from, and what is the impact that it has on the candidate?
I think
the candidate after the person gets elected.
Yeah. To answer the first part of your question, it used to be that it was always the case. I don't want people to distort what's happening now within, in relationship to the past. It used to be that a number of the developers in town would give money, in decent amounts. And some of the unions would give money. It's where the changes come, besides some people, bankrolling or loaning their campaigns, tens of thousands of dollars, is the fact that we've all of a sudden, like the rest of the country in some ways, we've got PACs involved, these political action committees. In terms of the influence, I'm not sure how much there's an influence. I know in my own case, both times I ran, I told people, look, please give me some money, or I'd be happy, if you gave me some money, but you're not going to have, a special, interest with me. I'm not going to be necessarily voting for everything that you want. So just understand that that's the case. And I'm not sure.
Was that said to them before they gave you the money?
Yeah, I did that before they gave me the money.
And
No, I always made that clear, and I don't think I was an exception. There were a number of people like that. It seems like, as Gennady, in terms of the Palo Alto City Council, as Gennady did in his interview, it seems like we've got, somewhat of these divisions going on, more in some of the city council races, not just Palo Alto, but some of the other ones.
Well, Vic, in terms of talking about divisions and campaign financing, I think Gennady.
Well, if I could just mention a couple of quick things about pertaining to Palo Alto race. I do agree with what Vic said to an extent. I feel like in the last 3 elections, to win, you pretty much need to have a floor of $40,000 to $50,000 in Palo Alto. There have been a bunch of candidates who raised well more than that, 70, 80, 90,000. Mm-hmm. That has not created any kind of correlation with winning. Like some of the candidates who had those high amounts, thinking Arthur Keller, Corey Walbach, didn't win the election despite having those high totals. But I don't necessarily agree that if you raise a bunch of money from developers, that's frowned upon. It is somewhat, but we can't look past the fact that Greg Tanaka, who's raised tens of thousands of dollars in both of his runs, won last time and is on the verge of winning the re-election again. So I kind of do.
I'm not sure, Gennady, if it's frowned upon in terms of developers. As I said, they've typically given in the past. It's all of a sudden having these PACs involved. I think that concerns some people because it seems like there's a disconnect, between a developer, a lot of who, either live or work in town, or some of the other groups, all of a sudden sort of an anonymous entity getting money from people who you're not sure who that is. I think that's sort of the difference.
Vic and Gennady, where is all of this money going? I mean, if you're raising $80,000 and you're not winning.
Gennady might be able to answer that better than me, Henrietta, but that's a good question because, there's only so many things you can spend on.
Advertising, Facebook, Google, all sorts of things that candidates normally spend money on, outreach efforts. And it's also hard to say kind of what the effect of it is because correlation doesn't mean causation. It's possible developers give to a certain candidate because he or she already aligns with their interests and not necessarily influence them.
Okay.
But I do think we need to get to Menlo Park City Council next, unless I'm wrong.
Yeah.
You're right. And that's what I was just looking at too. And I think Kate's got a guest.
If she's ready yet.
Are you ready for us, Kate?
I am. Hi, everyone.
Great.
Yeah, so is Jen here?
She is.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, great. Thanks so much for being here, Jen. Yeah, so I wanted to start by asking you, I've sort of been covering council long enough to see your political trajectory from, back in 2017 when you were quote unquote a Laurel mom trying to improve safety on one street. And if the results hold, you could be Menlo Park's first official District 3 councilwoman. So what would you say you have learned along your journey to this point that you think would help you as a council member?
First of all, thank you so much for having me here tonight. I'm just so excited to be able to participate in this conversation. And Kate, it's been funny because I think you started off as the Menlo Park beat reporter around the same time that I started advocating for safe routes to school in Menlo Park. So we've kind of come up together and bumped into each other over the years at city council meetings. And a couple things I've learned over the years. The first is you have to show up and you need to be persistent. And one of the first meetings I ever attended was a Transportation Commission meeting. And I kind of was frustrated at the end when they weren't going to do exactly what I asked them to do because I was naive and didn't even realize how the process worked. And one of the commissioners walked over to me and said, you need to keep showing up and you need to bring a lot of friends. And I took that to heart and I started talking to my neighbors and other people that were similarly interested in issues that I was interested in. And sure enough, I started attending meeting after meeting, not just at city council, but at the county, at the fire district, at the school boards, and really learned about the whole process. And so for anyone that's interested in getting involved civically or politically, the first thing is you have to like it and you have to show up and you have to stay informed too. So reading the Almanac, it's funny because I always say to my husband, I'm reading the paper and he's like, the New York Times? And I'm like, no, the Almanac. Because if you care about local issues, you really have to know what's happening locally. So I do have to say for anyone watching, please support your local newspapers and local journalists because they're really the eyes and ears of what goes on in our community. And then really, if you don't, another thing I learned is if you don't have a seat at the table, kind of pull up your own chair to the table. So like Kate said, when she first met me, I was the Laurel mom, and I had no idea how city government worked or what was going on. And by showing up, you realize, I can have a voice here too. And I'm just as qualified to represent or to speak about issues in my community as anyone else. And so learning to find your voice and learning to advocate for things you care about is a huge thing I've learned over the years, and something I look forward to enabling and encouraging other people to do as a leader in this community.
Well, you've certainly been a role model, Jen.
It's been so fun. I bike around town a lot. I have both a regular bike and an electric bike, and I wave to people. I always try to wear my helmet. Actually, I think because, these past couple days have been very anxious days. Yesterday, I actually got halfway to my son's school with him and realized I wasn't wearing my helmet, which never happens. And I thought, oh my gosh, people are going to see me, because I know people look at me and they see I wear my yellow vest and I wear my helmet, and I stop at all the stop signs.
For you soon, Jen. And I'd like to thank you. Yellow vest and helmet at all.
Yeah, so I'm okay being the nerdy mom and trying to do the right thing. We all make mistakes, but I think living our values and showing others how we can treat each other is a good thing for leaders to do.
Thanks so much. I see Jocelyn with us back again. Are you
Yes,
ready, Jocelyn?
thank you so much, Jen, and thank you, Kate, for the interview. Congratulations and best of luck to you as you start the council job. We're going to move on to East Palo Alto City Council, and we have our reporter Lloyd Lee with us. Lloyd's been interviewing the candidates for East Palo Alto City Council. We thought that we would take a look at the results and then also talk about some of the issues that are going on there. I think we have Councilman Larry Moody with us, but perhaps only on audio.
No.
No, I'm here.
Oh, you're here. Great. Okay, so we have, hi, Larry.
Right. Oh,
There you are.
There it is.
I see you.
Hi.
And we have Lloyd as well. Lloyd, are you here?
Hi.
There we go.
Just have to quickly rename myself.
All right. Well, Lloyd and Larry, take it away. Let's talk a little bit about the campaign.
So Larry, thanks for joining us this evening.
Sure.
You saw the results as I did. Coming in right now, as of 10 p.m., you're at 1,012 votes. That's 12% of the votes. Can you tell me where your mind is at right now?
Well, I kind of I accept the fact that I might go to bed for the first time in a number of years on November the 3rd. Not guaranteed that I'm going to be reelected or reappointed to my seat. So, so with that said, certainly, I can wake up in the morning and things can certainly change. It looks like I'm about 200 votes behind, and we did a great job working the polls today, and there was a lot of walk-up activity in East Palo Alto, which was very, very pleasing to everyone. I believe all the candidates, and then certainly for the city at large. Yeah, so where I'm at, a little surprised. I thought as an incumbent and our body of work over the last 8 years, and certainly with our community engagement and our name recognition and many of the endorsements that we received, that we were in a good position to move our message forward, and that it was going to be well received. So, but yet I was pleasantly pleased at the response of all 7 candidates towards this upcoming election. I think it was, yeah, good.
You said that for you, the results are quote unquote an interesting response from the community, and that it speaks to your results to your efforts to promote community economic development, commercial development. Can
Yeah, I
you
said that a
actually
little
explain what you mean by that?
Well, I think, given that I'm promoting, and my number one priority is economic development and commercial development for the community. I think we've been long overdue in our ability to ambitiously pursue increase in our tax base. I know for a fact that I've been instrumental in identifying water for our community, so we can actually do development. I was involved with the water transfer with City of Mountain View, and certainly with our friend Pat Burke. And I'm glad to see that Pat has returned back to the City Council in Palo Alto to identify that additional water, so that we can entertain the idea of developing in East Palo Alto. So here we are, right? We're at a place right now where we have about 15 to 16 projects that have already gone through the process of the Planning Commission and have been teed up by the City Council. And just the idea for me was one of promoting the idea of seeing East Palo Alto in a different light, of seeing our community as a community that is engaged and committed to being a part of the Silicon Valley footprint. Now, obviously, COVID really had an impact, continues to have a tremendous impact on our community. Certainly, the rent moratorium has created a different level of stress and tension in our community. So while prior to COVID, we always had the tension and the issues of affordable housing that was certainly hovering over our community. When COVID hit, and certainly with the health issues associated with our community having one of the highest rates of COVID impact in San Mateo County, I believe it was very hard for many of the local constituents to really focus in on the level of this conversation about economic development and growth in the manner that we had hoped.
Mm-hmm. Larry, just one final question. If the results continue to go the way they're going, where do you see yourself in terms of your role in the community? Will you continue pursuing a city role, or?
Well, I don't know. I really don't know. I think that's a conversation that my wife and my family and my supporters, I think we certainly need to have. I don't think there's any rush, right, to make a decision. In East Palo Alto, I have the good fortune of being able to walk into a lot of settings, nonprofit organizations, school campuses, right, local churches, and I have the ability to participate in those settings, right? In a kind of I've always saw myself as someone that was willing to volunteer and to participate and stay engaged. I will say that a lot of my focus, whether I return to the council or not, will be on the East Palo Alto Sanitary District. I want to make sure that that sanitary district and the city come to some level of agreement, or that LAFCO, right, interjects its review to make sure that we're in a position that we can continue the conversation of development in East Palo Alto.
Larry, I just want to thank you so much for your service and wish you the best for whatever the results may be. I know you'll be a great service to the community in the future in whatever role you take on. So,
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for being here tonight. Really
Thank you, Larry.
It.
It's my pleasure.
Right. We don't have much time left. I just want to run through a couple of more election results. If we can get on the measures results up on the screen, that would be great. We've got measures O, measures S, a lot of tax votes. We'll see how people ended up. Looks like, yeah, school district, it only needed 66.67%. We've got 79% right now. Pretty strong lead, Vic, I would say.
Yeah, some people were talking about the fact that it might not get enough of a vote and they'd have to bring it back, in March or May of next year because of the importance of this measure in terms of financing school district
And it should be
efforts.
stated that the Palo Alto residents voted to add $836 to their property taxes for the next few years. So voters need to be commended for adding to their property taxes to support schools.
Yeah, that's no small amount of money.
No,
We have Measure C. This is the RVs in Mountain View, whether or not they should be allowed to stay on the streets, and people, whether or not they should be banned, rather.
Right.
So we've got a yes, pretty strong lead, 51% of the vote needed. So it looks like that is going to pass. We have Measure S, which is the water district, Valley Water. They wanted to renew a parcel tax that wasn't going to expire until 8 years from now.
Right.
Looks like that is not going to pass. Yeah, 51% needed. Actually, I think it's 66% needed.
seems like the Sierras Club's opposition to it might have really swayed a lot of voters.
For sure, for
Yeah.
sure. And then finally, we have Measure RR, which is the Caltrain sales tax. Caltrain's in a bit of a pickle with the pandemic and 95% of its ridership not riding Caltrain now. This was a measure to start a dedicated source of funding. And we have the results from the 3 counties. Looks like it's going to pass.
I think that's
healthy lead.
important. It's important because having done some work in this area, Caltrains is funded, one of its key funding sources is each of the counties contributing some money to it. And when each of those counties hits a down cycle, they tend to give less, or it's a more problematic source of funding. So this is good news for Caltrain, because now they have their own dedicated funding source, not dependent on 3 jurisdictions.
But the argument against it was that it would fall heavily on essential workers because those who make the most money are working from home. So it would really come out of the pocketbooks of people who might least be able to afford it.
We will see what happens there. Yeah, you're right. As a sales tax as opposed to a parcel tax. Well, you know, we've had a lot of election results kind of thrown at us this hour. I really want to ask Henrietta and Vic for kind of your final thoughts on this election, maybe on the voting style that we've come into, vote by mail. Do you think this is a trend for the future? Do you think we're going to be continuing it on in this fashion, pandemic or no pandemic?
Well, I certainly think so. You know, once people begin to do something differently, it's almost like breaking the mold, and maybe you just don't go back. You know, there's the idea of the new normal, and there's been so much that has happened this year until I think we're all finding a new normal in many different directions, and voting might just be one of them.
All right, looks like we have about 30 seconds left. Vic, any final thoughts on this election and these races?
I think I'm like everybody else. It's been a long wait to get to today because of some of the things happening nationally. I think there's a high level of anxiety. That's what I heard from my friends. It isn't just me saying that. And I'm happy that a lot of people got out and voted. I mean, in the end, to me, voting is a sacred right, and it's one that you have a responsibility to do. So it looks like we're going to get high voter turnout. We'll see, but I think it's a good thing.
And we'll have to accept results wherever they fall.
Yes.
That's for sure. Well, it's the one thing that we could do in this pandemic is vote and vote our conscience. So Vic and Henrietta, thank you so much for taking the show on tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks to the Midpen Media Center, to the Almanac, to KZSU, and of course to all the reporters at the Palo Alto Weekly for taking time tonight to bring us the local results. No matter what happens, remember, we're in this together, and we will get through this together as long as we stick together. Hope everyone has a great night.